Hey, God bless YouTube land. I just got woken up a few minutes ago by a dear brother, a guy I just love to death. A young guy who just got his heart broken for the first time. Had never really dated before, and he found this Christian girl that he fell for, and he wanted to marry her. And for the past 2 months, he's just put everything into this, and I mean, it even looked good for a bit. It looked like they were talking marriage, and everything was looking good, and then it just got pulled out underneath him today, and he was crushed. And so he called me, and I was consoling him a little bit, and just trying to encourage him. And as I was doing that and explaining a little bit that I had learned about relationships, the Lord laid some stuff on my heart, and had me thinking of some things. When I, as a younger kid, I've always been a real emotional guy, but I was very shy, and always felt the need to bottle that emotion up. I just couldn't. I didn't know how to deal with my emotions at all, and I always loved girls. Was always fascinated, but wasn't very good with them at all. I was horrible as a kid. I was a good-looking kid, so and I was an athlete, and got good grades, and so I did. Girls went for me, and I did have girlfriends. I had relationships, and man, I loved them. I loved the incredible highs of a new romance, of meeting a new girl, and just falling for her, and the newness of it, and I just loved it. I also had a lot of lows. There was always the lows, and I experienced them all the way. The troubled spots in relationships and the inevitable breakup. I had a lot of romances, which is, I'm not saying that's a holy thing. I'm not trying to pitch romances at all. I'm just talking about, I'm showing what the Lord showed me, taught me through all of those romances. As I said, I loved the romances. I loved the highs, and I suffered the lows. But at some point, I'd say my mid-30s, I had been left by the mother of my daughter, and had gone through a really horrible time with that, losing my daughter and losing my ex. But I had lost a lot of weight. I was 70 pounds lighter than I am now, and looked a ton younger. Didn't have the beard, and the hair was perfect, the clothes were perfect. I had some money. I could do whatever I needed to do. Had a nice car, and somehow sort of hit my stride with the opposite sex. I became sort of like a player. I knew how to approach them. I was getting a lot of girls, and I knew how to talk. I knew what to say, how to act, and I had never really experienced this before. I knew how to play the game. I learned how to play the game, and I was always playing. And even girls that weren't really interested in me, I knew how to talk to make them. And it sort of sucked. I was getting the girls that I always wanted, and dating really pretty girls a lot younger than me. But there wasn't the highs. I always had to play the game. I mean, we always seem to, or so many people we always want what we shouldn't. Or not always, but so many times we wanted what we shouldn't. I mean, they would want me because I knew how to play the game, and I would want them for the wrong reasons, and it was a game. I didn't have the highs of the romance, and I wouldn't allow myself to suffer the lows because I had to stay too cool. Couldn't show any emotion. Had to be the bad boy, and this went on for a long time until I met my wife. And even though I had, like I said, I dated a lot of girls during that time period after learning how to play the game. It wasn't the same, and the Lord was showing me tonight that relationships, or the relationship with Him and religion, is sort of like that. That when we try to box up our relationship with God, when we try to run this little religious track that we're on, everything's got to be just so. We got to stay sober in the Lord. Can't show any emotions, can't have any feelings. I don't see the Bible saying that anywhere, but I hear it all the time. You can't deal with feelings in God. Man, that's not the God I know. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, you don't know my God. Well, I think I know Him differently, and I'm happy with what I've got. I love the highs. I've always loved the highs of a romance, and there's no better one than with God. And I have some incredible highs. where the fires burn and the spirit's rolling, and things are just so awesome, and he's teaching me things and he's showing me things, and I love it. And there's lows, there's lows that I go through, when I fall into sin, or I get confused, or I put an idol in my life, and where he's got to teach me a lesson, or he's got to discipline me, and he's got to bring me back up. Those times of desert that I go through are lows, and they're tough, but I wouldn't trade the highs that I have. And this might, maybe you can't relate with this, and a lot of people I know don't want to even think about relating with God this way. But I really see it as a romance, and I mean, he's a wild lover. He sent his son to die for us because he loved us so much. I mean, that's wild. And he gives us free will, and he allows us to sin, and he allows us to go our own way. And I say just ride the wave. Don't get so caught up in religion. I mean, people are so afraid right now, because so many people feel that he's coming, and they hear everyone else saying that he's coming, and they maybe they're not right. Maybe you're not right. Maybe you don't have it all down right now. Maybe you're still working it out with fear and trembling. Don't let people confuse you. That he said there would be fear and trembling, to work it out that way. Don't feel the need to be on somebody else's religious path. Don't you have to go through their doctrinal checklist, and don't rely on anybody else to lead you home, to show you how to find God. You don't need anybody else to find God. He's calling you. You just got to go towards him, and it is a romance, and it's amazing. I had a lot of great romances in my life, but I have to be honest. And I love my wife, I love my kids, I love my family, but I've never in my life met anybody who I could completely trust my heart with. I mean, we're all damaged, and we damage each other. And I just don't think there's anybody that we can perfectly trust. But God, we can perfectly trust. We can give our hearts to him and know that he's not gonna do anything harmful to us. And that's the God that I know. I see so many people talking about this harsh, judgmental God, and I know there's different facets to him, and I know that he's a righteous God and he's a holy God. But I'll tell you, I'd have to say that my experience with him since I found him has been one of mercy and grace and love and peace. I mean, he's more merciful. He's merciful beyond any reason. And he's loving beyond any human measure. There's nothing else that compares to it. And it's amazing. The highs are amazing. I mean, there's such amazing heights we can reach with God. And he wants us to walk like that. And I know a lot of people would say, no, it's got to be a straight, sober walk. I'm telling you, man, as I think about it, and I think about Paul, and I think about Moses and Joseph and David, they seemed to experience the Lord that way. It was like a romance. There was some amazing highs with those guys, and there were some lows. There were some times that were low when they felt like they had been abandoned. And Jesus even, I mean, I'm sure he had pretty much always a high, but he definitely experienced the low right there at the end. My God, why have you forsaken me? He experienced a low too. And, don't let anybody else tell you that, there's something wrong with you when you go through those lows, or that you got to follow their path, or go their way, or have them lead you into the kingdom. No, you don't. At least I'm not going to go that way. I found God by myself. I sought after him. I mean, he called me. He told me to seek him, and I did, and I found him, or he found me. However it worked, I found him. And, lately, I to a certain extent, I got sucked into other people's telling me how I have to do this and how I have to do that, and got to think this and got to know that. Man, forget that. I'm going to let Jesus lead me home. I found him on my own. I'm going to lead him. I'm going to let him lead me home. And I suggest that's what y'all do. that you don't worry about how everyone else is telling you what to do, and how to know God and how to find God and how to please God. I do believe, and I'd say I know, that all you really got to do is want to please God and be willing to do whatever it takes to seek Him and to know Him, and He'll come to you. That's my experience, and I believe that's what the Bible says. I believe that's what the Word says when we interpret it correctly. And I'm just telling you, we can have that. Don't get caught up in the doctrinal box of trying to control your religion. It's a wild ride, especially this time in history. It's a wild ride. Enjoy the waves. There's going to be a few wipeouts, but He'll pick us up. As long as we get up, dust ourselves off, and are willing to keep going, He's going to keep leading us home. And I think that's the best way to approach it. Enjoy the romance. Enjoy the wave. And ride it. Ride it in His power. Ride it in His strength. And most of all, ride it in His love. Because He is merciful. He's loving. And don't miss out on that. Anyway, God bless. I love y'all in Jesus.